If you're thinking about doing a working holiday visa in Australia, you need to do it. Seriously, don't give it a second thought because it's going to be the best time of your life. Before you decide to do it, there are a few things you need to take into consideration, such as the visa application, how much to save before you get there, where you're going to live, how you're going to find accommodation, and so much more, so let's get into it. So you're going to need to save some money before you go to Australia so that you can prove you have enough money to stay there and so you have enough money to afford living there when you arrive. In order to determine how much money you're going to need to save before you leave, you should have a good idea of where you want to live. This doesn't mean it has to be cut in stone and that you have to decide on one place and one place only, but you should take a look at different cities to gauge how much they're going to cost to live in. Major cities such as Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, etc. will be a higher cost of living than more remote towns or villages. You can use this website right here to determine how much it's going to cost to live in different cities and different countries if you want. Next, you'll want to work out how much money you're spending each month at home. Look through your current expenses and compare it to Australia. This will give you a good idea of how much money you need to have readily available each month when you're in Australia. After that, you'll have to look into flights, insurance, and the visa, but we'll get into those details shortly. Before I jump into the working holiday visa, you should know about a few other visa options as well. It's important to note that the price is going to vary depending on which country you're from when you're applying, so I'm going to show you examples from Canada because I'm from Canada. I'll also leave all the links in the description box below for different countries and every single type of visa I talk about today, so if you want more details, make sure to check it out in the description. So first up is the tourist visa ETA Subclass 601. This is a $20 Australian visa that allows you to stay for up to 90 days. There's another tourist visa that allows you to stay for longer, which is Subclass 600. If you're applying outside of Australia, it is 190 Australian dollars and they will allow you to stay anywhere from 3 months to 12 months. If you're in Australia when you're applying for this visa, it jumps up to $475. So if you think you're going to want to stay longer on a tourist visa, try to apply for it when you're outside the country. This might be a good option for digital nomads because there isn't a specific digital nomad visa. However, I don't know what the application process really entails and how long it takes for them to clear you through. So that's something to keep in mind. If you are interested in digital nomad visas, I just posted a video last week about the Canadian digital nomad visa that's coming out later this year, so give that a watch if you're interested in that. Next up is the student visa. This is a great option if you are studying in university and your school has an exchange program like mine did. My university did a study abroad where you could do 1 semester or 2 semesters abroad with partnering universities. So if you're in uni right now, check out if your current university has that as an option. You could also apply for Subclass 500, which is another student visa for full-time students. This allows you to study full-time and work part-time hours, roughly 20 hours a week, for 5 years. The cost is 710 Australian dollars for this specific visa, and it comes with a few stipulations which you'll need to look into further. Make sure you check out the link in my description. Next, we got the working holiday visas. Okay, so it's broken up into 2 different visas depending on the majority of the countries that are allowed into Australia. First, we have Subclass 417, which if you're Canadian is the one that applies to you. It allows you to work and live in Australia from the age of 18 to 35. So if you're in that category, then that means you can apply for this visa. The cost is $635 Australian, and it's important to note that you need to have enough money to support yourself while you're there, and generally this means that you need to have roughly 5,000 Australian dollars in your bank account. If you want to extend the visa, you can do so by doing 3 months of specified work, aka farm work. It's also possible to get a 3rd year if you do 6 months of the specified work. However, keep in mind that this has to be completed in your 2nd year, and the 3 months of farm work have to be completed in your 1st year. Next up is the working holiday Subclass 462, and this applies to Americans as well as another long range of different countries. This visa is pretty much the same as the previous visa. The only real difference is that the age is from 18 to 30 instead of 18 to 35 for some countries in the previous list. Again, you'll need to prove that you have enough money for your stay, and you're going to also have to pay the application fee. When it comes to insurance, you definitely should have insurance when you're staying in another country or traveling in general. I've been using Safety Wing for over a year now as a digital nomad who is bouncing around from place to place, and I would definitely recommend using them because they are one of the cheapest insurances I could find, quite frankly, and they are just super easy to set up. If you're interested in using Safety Wing, I will leave a link for you so you can check that out as well. So recently there's been some news when it comes to UK citizens living and working in Australia. UK citizens are allowed to stay for up to 3 years, but the biggest news here is that they don't have to do any of the specified work or farm work. This is an amazing thing that they've just announced because honestly, the farm work is a huge deterrent and one of the reasons why I didn't stay for additional years in Australia. Because while they say that it's 3 months or 6 months, 3 months is 90 working days, which ends up being roughly 4 months. So you can only imagine how long 6 months would actually turn out to be. Citizens from the UK would typically apply with Subclass 417 like Canadians and a whole long list of other countries, but the new rule starts in July 2024. The age has also been increased from 30 being the limit to the age 35, so if you're still below the age of 35, you have a chance to work in Australia for 3 years. So with visas aside, you'll want to consider where to live. This can be really overwhelming because Australia has so many nice places to choose from. Of course, you don't need to stay in the same place for the first year, 2 years, or 3 years. You can move around as much as you want. However, I would have a place in mind that you want to start out with. So here are a few that I'd suggest. I'm definitely biased when it comes to Melbourne because I studied abroad there and I did my working holiday visa there. I honestly think that Melbourne has the perfect balance of city, nature, beaches, all quite close. The summers are amazing, they're super hot and great temperature, but the winters aren't the best. I'd say they get down to like 10 degrees during the day. Melbourne has been voted the most livable city in the world for many years in a row, so that's definitely saying something. Sydney is a popular spot for travelers for a reason. They have better weather than Melbourne, they have nicer beaches than Melbourne, arguably, and there's just a lot that you can do there. However, this comes with a lot more tourists and higher cost of living. If you're looking for a low-key city, Brisbane might be right up your alley. I found it a little bit boring because it's not near the water, it's not near a beach. They do have a man-made beach there, but it didn't really feel like a city that I would want to stay in for too long. With that being said, it's close to the Gold Coast, and Queensland in general is filled with so many beautiful beaches. You could also decide to go a little bit further south in New South Wales to Byron Bay, and that's a popular spot for travelers too. On the complete other side of the country, you have Perth in Western Australia, and they have probably the best beaches I've ever been to, which is hard because Australia has so many. But I'm telling you, they have stunning beaches. The city is a little bit small, not a whole lot going on, but they have amazing weather year-round. Adelaide is perfect if you're looking for a small city that has festivals, good food, and of course good beaches. South Australia is the only state I haven't been to, so I've never been to Adelaide, but I have heard good things about it. Flight prices are going to go up and down and fluctuate no matter what country you're flying from. I know that they can be quite expensive, and I'm talking from experience of flying from Canada across the world to Australia. It's one heck of a journey, so you're gonna have to budget for that accordingly. While round-trip flights are most cost-effective, I would go in with a one-way ticket because you never know how long you're really gonna want to stay. And if you're flexible, you might end up finding a ticket that is generally much cheaper. Here's a little bonus tip for my friends who are from Canada and going to be flying from Toronto. From my experience, the cheapest way to fly from Toronto to Melbourne or Sydney is going through Honolulu. Most of my flights before were previously going through LA and they were quite pricey. But taking a small layover in Honolulu allowed me to save hundreds of dollars. Plus, I had a short little trip in Hawaii as well. You can extend the dates in Honolulu to stay there for a week, 2 weeks, or even longer if you want to, but it is a pretty pricey city, so keep that in mind as well. You should also think about whether or not you want to try to find some work opportunities before you get to Australia. I personally went with the intention of getting some experience in my field, so I applied to some internships before I got there. I ended up finding my internship through a website called Pedestrian TV. However, you can find some on LinkedIn or other job boards. So when you first arrive, you're going to want to set up your SIM card. I went with Vodafone, but there are so many different providers that you can choose from, all of which have really good prices compared to Canada. I was there in 2018, but at the time I was paying around 35 Australian dollars for about 12 or 13 gigs of data, which to me was pretty good. Alright, that's the second time my card has been full and I've had to delete stuff off this camera, so I'm going to try to get through this quickly. Plus I had a little outfit change because it's getting warm in here. So when you arrive, you're going to have to set up your banking. I'm not sure if it still stands, but previously in 2018 when I was there, you had to set up banking in order to get a SIM card. So when you get there, make sure you set it up right away. You'll need your passport, your social insurance number, and your ID. You also need an address in Australia, so if you're staying at an Airbnb or a hotel or a hostel, you can use that. But if you've already figured out accommodation, then put that address. The major benefit of having an Australian bank account is that you don't have ATM fees or withdrawal fees or anything like that when you're living in Australia. I just went with Westpac because I'm with Scotiabank in Canada and they are affiliated, so it made things a lot easier. Next, you're going to need to get yourself a tax file number. You can do this online through the Australian Taxation Office. I'll leave a link for you. And this is the best case because you get taxed at 15% as a backpacker instead of 47% as an Australian citizen. It can take a few days to get this set up, so I'd recommend doing that as soon as you arrive, and that way it's easier when you get hired somewhere. Superannuation is essentially an Australian retirement fund. So on a working holiday visa, you still have to contribute to your super. This means that when you get a job, you ask them what super they're in, and if you have different jobs, ask beforehand so that you can do everything on one super account. Finding a place to live in Australia can be stressful, but use these 3 websites and you'll have no trouble. Gum postings all the time. It's basically Kijiji if you're from Canada, and you can find different postings there. Fairy Floss is a Facebook group and I had a lot of luck on there as well, but the best website by far is flatmates.com.au. One thing to consider when you're getting a job in Australia is that you can only work at one place for 6 months at a time, so you have to get 2 different jobs if you're going to be doing the working holiday visa. You can get cash in hand jobs, or you can get a normal like 9-to-5 job, or you can get a regular job that is taxed. Generally, the cash in hand jobs are cafes, restaurants, bars. They basically pay you under the table in cash, so you both don't have to deal with the taxes, but this can be a bit sketchy. They do a lot of trial shifts that don't result in jobs a lot of the time, so I would steer clear from it if you can. The benefit to these jobs is that you can kind of pick up and leave and travel around Australia if you want, but if you want to be more settled in a place, I would go with a full-time job or part-time job. If you're looking for a professional job, I would highly recommend working for a university if you can get a short-term contract because they pay so well. I'm telling you. Go on Hays, go on Indeed, go on Seek. All of those websites will have different options, and search for university like admin type jobs. You can be making $40+ an hour Australian. So that's all I've got on Australia's working holiday visa. I hope you found this helpful. Check out my other videos on Australia if you have a second, and I'll see you next week for a new video. Bye!